Utter it, Jane, but I wish that instead of a mere inquiry into perhaps a secret, it was a wish for half my estate. So Mr. Rochester says he would rather her ask for half of all that he owns than that she ask to learn a secret. Now, King Ahasuerus, what do I want with half your estate? Do you think I am usurer seeking good investment in land? I would much rather have all your confidence. You will not exclude me from your confidence if you admit me to your heart. So she asks him, if you love me, you will tell me secrets and keep me in your confidence. She also mentions King Ahasuerus, who is married to Queen Esther, and that's actually where the story of Purim comes from in the Torah or in the Bible, Old Testament. I should mention, too, that in my copy of the book, there's the word Jew before usurer. That was an anti-Semitic prejudice that we no longer espouse and would certainly not say, but it is in the original text, unfortunately. You are welcome to all my confidence that is worth having, Jane, but for God's sake, don't desire a useless burden. Don't long for poison. Don't turn out a downright Eve on my hands. Why not, sir? You have just been telling me how much you like to be conquered and how pleasant over-persuasion is to you. Don't you think I had better take advantage of the confession and begin and coax and entreat, even cry and be sulky if necessary, for the sake of a mere essay of my power? I dare you to any such experiment. Encroach, presume, and the game is up. Is it, sir? You soon give in. How stern you look now. Your eyebrows have become as thick as my finger, and your forehead resembles what, in some very astonishing poetry, I once saw styled a blue-piled thunderloft. That will be your married look, sir, I suppose. If that will be your married look, I, as a Christian, will soon give up the notion of consorting with a mere sprite or salamander. But what had you to ask, thing? Out with it. So the mood kind of changes. She says, oh, weren't you just talking about how you like to be mastered and how I can order you around now? But now that it's this possible secret being discussed, he seems to change and become kind of surly and angry again. And then she says, oh, that angry look is how you're going to look when we're married, I see. She says that kind of with like a little wink. Jane still has some humor. And then he calls her a thing. So he's getting angrier. Perhaps not truly angry. There's still a little bit of a humorous note to this. There, you are less than civil now, and I like rudeness a great deal better than flattery. I'd rather be a thing than an angel. This is what I have to ask. Why did you take such pains to make me believe you wished to marry Miss Ingram? Is that all? Thank God it is no worse. And now he undid his black brows, looked down, smiling at me, and stroked my hair, as if well pleased at seeing a danger averted. I think I may confess, he continued, even although I should make you a little indignant, Jane, and have seen what a fire spirit you can be when you are indignant. And I have seen what a fire spirit you can be when you are indignant. You glowed in the cool moonlight last night when you mutinied against fate and claimed your rank as my equal. Janet, by the by, it was you who made me the offer. Of course I did, but to the point, if you please, sir. Miss Ingram? Well, I feigned courtship of Miss Ingram because I wished to render you as madly in love with me as I was with you, and I knew jealousy would be the best ally I could call in for the furtherance of that end. Excellent, now you are small, not one whit bigger than the end of my little finger. It was a burning shame and a scandalous disgrace to act in that way. Did you think nothing of Miss Ingram's feelings, sir? So Mr. Rochester says that he pretended he was going to marry Blanche so that Jane would fall madly in love with him as he was with her. Normally you just ask someone if they like you, not Mr. Rochester. So Jane calls him small, so she's saying that now you're being petty, and that's pretty horrible. She tells him that it's pretty horrible to do. And didn't you think about Blanche's feelings? Her feelings are concentrated in one, pride, and that needs humbling. Were you jealous, Jane? So he says that he doesn't really care about Blanche's feelings because she's just too proud and she needed to be humbled anyway, and then immediately asks her, were you jealous? Like a little kid asking, do you like me? Never mind, Mr. Rochester. It is in no way interesting to you to know that. Answer me truly once more. Do you think Miss Ingram will not suffer from your dishonest coquetry? Won't she feel forsaken and deserted? Impossible. When I told you how she, on the contrary, deserted me, the idea of my insolvency cooled, or rather extinguished, her flame in a moment. So Jane says, really, won't her feelings be affected? And Mr. Rochester says, no, her feelings were gone when she thought that I had no money. You have a curious designing mind, Mr. Rochester. I am afraid your principles on some points are eccentric. My principles were never trained, Jane. They may have grown a little awry for want of attention. Once again, seriously, may I enjoy the great good that has been vouchsafed to me without fearing that anyone else is suffering the bitter pain I myself felt a while ago? That you may, my good little girl. There is not another being in the world has the same pure love for me as yourself, for I lay that pleasant unction to my soul, Jane, in belief in your affection. So Jane says, is anyone else being hurt and feeling what was feeling before? And Mr. Rochester says no, that she's the only person who has that same pure love for him. I turned my lips to the hand that lay on my shoulder. I loved him very much, more than I could trust myself to say, more than words had power to express. Ask something more, he said presently. It is my delight to be entreated and to yield. I was again ready with my request. Communicate your intentions to Mrs. Fairfax, sir. She saw me with you last night in the hall, and she was shocked. Give her some explanation before I see her again. It pains me to be misjudged by so good a woman. So Jane asked him to tell Mrs. Fairfax. Go to your room and put on your bonnet, he replied. I mean you to accompany me to Millcote this morning, and while you prepare for the drive, I will enlighten the old lady's understanding. Did she think, Janet, you had given the world for love and considered it well lost? So he asks if Mrs. Fairfax thinks that she had given the world for love, so like gave up all of her self-respect and, just is having some sort of like affair with Mr. Rochester, really. I believe she thought I had forgotten my station and yours, sir. Station? Your station is in my heart and on the necks of those who would insult you, now or hereafter. Go. I was soon dressed, and when I heard Mr. Rochester quit Mrs. Fairfax's parlor, I hurried down to it. The old lady had been reading her morning portion of Scripture, the lesson for the day. Her Bible lay open before her, and her spectacles were upon it. Her occupation, suspended by Mr. Rochester's announcement, seemed now forgotten. Her eyes, fixed on the blank wall opposite, expressed the surprise of a quiet mind stirred by unwonted tidings. Seeing me, she roused herself. She made a sort of effort to smile, and framed a few words of congratulation. But the smile expired, and the sentence was abandoned and unfinished. She put up her spectacles, shut the Bible, and pushed her chair back from the table. I feel so astonished, she began. I hardly know what to say to you, Miss Eyre. I have surely not been dreaming, have I? Sometimes I half fall asleep when I am sitting alone and fancy things that have never happened. It has seemed to me more than once when I have been in a doze that my dear husband, who died 15 years since, has come in and sat down beside me, and that I have even heard him call me by my name, Alice, as he used to do. Now, can you tell me whether it is actually true that Mr. Rochester has asked you to marry him? Don't laugh at me, but I really thought he came in here 5 minutes ago and said that in a month you would be his wife. He said the same thing to me, I replied. He has. Do you believe him? Have you accepted him? Yes. She looks at me bewildered. I could never have thought it. He is a proud man. All the Rochesters were proud, and his father, at least, liked money. He, too, has always been called careful. He means to marry you? He tells me so. She surveyed my whole person. In her eyes, I read that they had there found no charm powerful enough to solve the enigma. It passes me, she continued, but no doubt it is true since you say so. How it will answer I cannot tell. I really don't know. Equality of position and fortune is often advisable in such cases, and there are 20 years of difference in your ages. He might be almost your father. No, indeed, Mrs. Fairfax, exclaimed I, nettled. He is nothing like my father. No one who saw us together would suppose it for an instant. Mr. Rochester looks as young, and is as young, as some men at 25. Is it really for love he is going to marry you? She asked. I was so hurt by her coldness and skepticism that tears rose to my eyes. I'm sorry to grieve you, pursued the widow, but you are so young and so little acquainted with men. I wish to put you on your guard. It is an old saying that all is not gold that glitters, and in this case I do fear there will be something found to be different to what either you or I expect. Why, am I a monster? I said. Is it impossible that Mr. Rochester should have a sincere affection for me? No, you are very well and much improved of late, and Mr. Rochester, I dare say, is fond of you. I have always noticed that you were a sort of pet of his. There are times when, for your sake, I have been a little uneasy at his marked preference, and have wished to put you on your guard, but I did not like to suggest even the possibility of wrong. I knew such an idea would shock, perhaps offend you, and you are so discreet and so thoroughly modest and sensible, I hoped you might be trusted to protect yourself. Last night I cannot tell you what I suffered when I sought all over the house and could find you nowhere, nor the master either, and then at 12 o'clock saw you come in with him. Well, never mind that now, I interrupted impatiently. It is enough that all was right. I hope all will be right in the end, she said, but believe me, you cannot be too careful. Try and keep Mr. Rochester at a distance. Distrust yourself as well as him. Gentlemen in his station are not accustomed to marry their governesses. I was growing truly irritated. Happily, Adele ran in. Let me go to Millcote too, she cried. Mr. Rochester won't, though there is so much room in the new carriage. Beg him to let me go, mademoiselle. That I will, Adele, and I hastened away with her, glad to quit my gloomy monitress. The carriage was ready, they were bringing it round to the front, and my master was pacing the pavement, Pilot following him backwards and forwards. So Mrs. Fairfax congratulates Jane, but then asks if it really happened, and then brings up a lot of concerns, some of which Jane has had before, but Jane had concerns in sort of this like self-defeating way, that she didn't really think that she was kind of like good enough for Mr. Rochester. And Mrs. Fairfax brings up some good points, that he's very old, he's 20 years older than her, thereabouts, that there's a difference between their wealth and their social station, and she's sort of, she's not really like mean about it, but she's certainly not happy for Jane, keeps asking if it's true, and seems a little bit concerned. She's a little bit worried, on guard, tells Jane that she should be on her guard and be kind of careful, and it just seems very strange to Mrs. Fairfax. So Mrs. Fairfax is not as happy as Jane is. Jane doesn't seem to care about age, and she certainly doesn't care about the difference between their wealth and their status. So it's just sort of a damper on everything, because Jane does like and respect Mrs. Fairfax, and the fact that Mrs. Fairfax isn't happy for her is pretty disappointing and unsettling. It kind of puts like this sour note on everything. Adele may accompany us, may she not, sir? I told her no, I'll have no brats, I'll have only you. Do let her go, Mr. Rochester, if you please, it would be better. Not it, she will be a restraint. He was quite peremptory, both in look and voice. The chill of Mrs. Fairfax's warnings and the damp of her doubts were upon me. Something of unsubstantiality and uncertainty had beset my hopes. I half lost a sense of power over him. I was about mechanically to obey him without further remonstrance, but as he helped me into the carriage, he looked at my face. What is the matter? He asked. All the sunshine is gone. Do you really wish the Baron to go? Will it annoy you if she's left behind? I would far rather she went, sir. Then off for your bonnet and back like a flash of lightning, cried he to Adele. She obeyed him with what speed she might. So Jane asks if Adele can go. At first, Mr. Rochester says no, he just wants to be with Jane. He sees that Jane looks really upset, mostly by what has happened with Mrs. Fairfax, but he agrees to let Adele come. After all, a single morning's interruption will not matter much, said he, when I mean shortly to claim you, your thoughts, conversation, and company, for life. Adele, when lifted in, commenced kissing me, by way of expressing her gratitude for my intercession. She was instantly stowed away into a corner on the other side of him. She then peeped round to where I sat, so stern a neighbor was too restrictive. To him, in his present fractious mood, she dared whisper no observations, nor ask of him any information. Let her come to me, I entreated. She will, perhaps, trouble you, sir. There is plenty of room on this side. He handed her over as if she had been a lapdog. I'll send her to school yet, he said, but now he was smiling. Adele heard him, and asked if she was to go to school sans mademoiselle, so without Jane. Yes, he replied, absolutely sans mademoiselle, for I am to take mademoiselle to the moon, and there I shall seek a cave in one of the white valleys among the volcano tops, and mademoiselle shall live with me there, and only me. She will have nothing to eat, you will starve her, observed Adele. I shall gather manna for her morning and night. The plains and the hillsides in the moon are bleached with manna, Adele. She will want to warm herself. What will she do for a fire? Fire rises out of the lunar mountains. When she is cold, I'll carry her up to a peak and lay her down on the edge of a crater. So Mr. Rochester comes up with this whole like inventive story about how he's going to take Jane away to the moon, and then Adele pretty hilariously brings up some practical concerns with this. So she says, well, how's she going to have food? How's she going to have fire? He's being very fanciful, and Adele does not see it. And then she says, oh, she'll be uncomfortable there. And her clothes, they will wear out. How could she get new ones? Mr. Rochester professed to be puzzled. Hem, said he. What would you do, Adele? Cudgel your brains for an expedient. How would a white or a pink cloud answer for a gown, do you think? And one could cut a pretty enough scarf out of a rainbow. She's far better as she is, concluded Adele, after musing some time. Besides, she would get tired of living with only you and the moon. If I were mademoiselle, I would never consent to go with you. She has consented, she has pledged her word. But you can't get her there. There is no road to the moon. It is all air, and neither you nor she can fly. Adele, look at that field. We were now outside Thornfield Gates and bowling lightly along the smooth road to Millcote, where the dust was well laid by the thunderstorm, and where the low hedges and lofty timber trees on each side glistened green and rain-refreshed. In that field, Adele, I was walking late one evening, about a fortnight since, the evening of the day you helped me to make hay in the orchard meadows, and as I was tired with raking swaths, I sat down to rest me on a stile. And there I took out a little book and a pencil, and began to write about a misfortune that befell me long ago, and a wish I had for happy days to come. I was writing away very fast, though daylight was fading from the leaf, when something came up the path and stopped 2 yards off me. I looked at it. It was a little thing with a veil of gossamer on its head. I beckoned it to come near me. It stood soon at my knee. I never spoke to it, and it never spoke to me in words, but I read its eyes, and it read mine, and our speechless colloquy was to this effect. It was a fairy, and come from Elfland, it said, and its errand was to make me happy. I must go with it out of the common world to a lonely place, such as the moon, for instance, and it nodded its head towards her horn, rising over a hay-hill. It told me of the alabaster cave and silver vale where we might live. I said I should like to go, but reminded it, as you did me, that I had no wings to fly. Oh, returned the fairy, that does not signify. Here is a talisman will remove all difficulties. And she held out a pretty gold ring. Put it, she said, on the fourth finger of my left hand, and I am yours, and you are mine, and we shall both leave earth and make our own heaven yonder. She nodded again at the moon. The ring, Adele, is in my breeches pocket, under the disguise of a sovereign, but I mean soon to change it to a ring again. But what has Mademoiselle to do with it? I don't care for the fairy. You said it was Mademoiselle you would take to the moon. Mademoiselle is a fairy, he said, whispering mysteriously. Whereupon I told her not to mind his badinage, and she, on her part, evinced a fund of genuine French skepticism, denominating Mr. Rochester a real liar, and assuring him that she made no account whatever of his fairy tales, and that, furthermore, there were no fairies, and even if there were some, she was sure they would never appear to him, nor ever give him rings, or offer to live with him in the moon. So Mr. Rochester continues this very fanciful story. We're supposed to be reminded of when Jane returned to Thornfield and they met and he was sitting on the stile and she came up to the road. That's supposed to be the fairy. So he kind of compares Jane quite frequently to an elf or a fairy creature. We see that again here. And then he kind of shifts and, again, he mentions the moon. But then he says that he has a talisman that will make get into the moon and live it on the moon just fine. And it's a gold ring that will go on the fourth finger of the fairy's left hand. So this is my left hand, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's your ring finger. So Mr. Rochester's talking about an engagement ring or a wedding band. And he says that he has it under the disguise of a sovereign, so he has it under the disguise of a coin, but he's going to change it into a ring, meaning that when they go to town, he's going to buy an engagement ring. Very long way of saying that. And Adele is still not buying that Jane is a fairy and that this is going to happen. The hour spent at Millcote was a somewhat harassing one to me. Mr. Rochester obliged me to go to a certain silk warehouse. There I was ordered to choose half a dozen dresses. I hated the business. I begged leave to defer it. No, it should be gone through with now. By dint of entreaties expressed in energetic whispers, I reduced the half dozen to 2. These, however, he vowed he would select himself. With anxiety, I watched his eye rove over the gay stores. He fixed on a rich silk of the most brilliant amethyst dye, and a superb pink satin. I told him in a new series of whispers that he might as well buy me a gold gown and a silver bonnet at once. I should certainly never venture to wear his choice. With infinite difficulty, for he was stubborn as a stone, I persuaded him to make an exchange in favor of a sober black satin and pearl gray silk. It might pass for the present, he said, but he would yet see me glittering like a parterre. Glad I was to get him out of the silk warehouse, and then out of a jeweler's shop. The more he bought me, the more my cheek burned with a sense of annoyance and degradation. As we re-entered the carriage, and I sat back feverish and fagged, I remembered what, in the hurry of events, dark and bright, I had wholly forgotten. The letter of my uncle John Eyre to Mrs. Reed, his intention to adopt me and make me his legatee. It would indeed be a relief, I thought, if I had ever so small an independency. I can never bear being dressed like a doll by Mr. Rochester, or sitting like a second Danae with the golden shower falling daily round me. I will write to Madeira the moment I get home, and tell my Uncle John I am going to be married, and to whom. And if I had but a prospect of one day bringing Mr. Rochester an accession of fortune, I could better endure to be kept by him now. And somewhat relieved by this idea, which I failed not to execute that day, I ventured once more to meet my master's and lover's eye, which most pertinaciously sought mine, though I averted both face and gaze. He smiled, and I thought his smile was such as a sultan might, in a blissful and fond moment, bestow on a slave his gold and gems had enriched. I crushed his hand, which was ever hunting mine, vigorously, and thrust it back to him red with a passionate pressure.